Okay, thanks.
Good afternoon. So, can I bug you all for 1 second? Sorry, I was thinking after lunch, and I tend to eat too much if I come to a buffet like this. Can I ask you all, just bear with me for 2 seconds, can I ask you all move to the edge of your seats, just for like 2 seconds? Just keep sitting, just move to the edge of your seats. Okay. Can I get everyone? Yes, keep coming. Keep coming to the edge of your seats. Okay. Can I get you all repeat after me, please? Can everyone go, ooh? Ooh. Okay. Can everyone go, ah? Ah. Okay, thank you very much. You can sit back.
So can I tweet? Speaker brought us to the edge of our
seats. Oohing and eyeing, yeah. Thanks. I don't know it's a cheap trick, but I just needed something to wake myself and everybody else up a little bit. Hi. Okay. My name is Pierre Durand. I have been, for the last 3 years or so, coaching scaled Agile in various organizations in South Africa, kind of much more enterprise-wide Agile adoptions. For the 7 or so years before that, while I was still living in Ireland, I was doing lean enterprise coaching and adoption in all sorts of shapes and forms, from heavy maintenance facilities right through to kind of small accounting practice implementations. So very broad range of different places that I've had to implement all sorts of tools. And I currently work for, in the last 3 years, I've been working with Kaizen Academies, interesting bunch of guys. And we're doing some interesting, we're involved in some very nice companies at the moment. So, that aside, my talk is entitled Agile versus Lean, Is There a Difference? And because I've got a bit of a varied sort of a background, I needed probably to just position where I come from when I talk about Lean or Agile or any of these things. And I know this might be a little bit like taking everyone back to basics for some people, and I apologize for that. But I always talk about our world of work first. So, if we go back far enough, it all started with craft production. Now, craft production was a craftsman or an artisan who was a skilled person, and he makes items that are functional or strictly decorative. In the craft era, craftsmen would take an idea right through from initial conception, when that idea came about, right through to final implementation, be control of the entire value stream that they were busy with, from when the idea was created to when they implemented it. So they had lots of control over the environment. Then things changed. Population expanded. We went to war. A lot of interesting things happened. And suddenly the demand, supply couldn't keep up with demand anymore. So we had to come up with a different way of work. So the world shifted. And we moved to a place where suddenly we started talking about mass production. Mass production, typically, you had one or few individuals who came up with recipes or process or way of work that were then implemented and followed without question by a larger organization. Is that making sense? Cool. It's nice when you nod. Kind of reaffirms, very low self-esteem. Not even smiling is good. Thank you. That might have been slightly over the top, but okay. So, this led to some interesting things started to happen in the world. This is actually the largest factory largest building on Earth today that's still standing empty. It was the Packard factory, built in 1903. It stood over 35 acres and had 40,000 employees in the one site. In that site, they had 123 engineers who created recipes for those 40,000 workers to implement regularly and follow without question. And my word, if you were on that line, you did not question that. You followed your instructions by the book. That's what you did. There was no kind of questioning or experimentation. It just didn't feature. 1942, the Dodge factory, 82 acres, 60,000 employees. And like you can imagine what it's like working in some of those factories. It would have been interesting, to say the least. So, the mass production era, 1900s, in 1900s, 41% of Americans worked in agriculture. 28.3% of Americans worked in manufacturing. So, I'll explain to you in a second why I'm touching on some of this stuff. But, so the world changed drastically from that craft production, the one man making horseshoes in his garage, through to this mass production pipeline type pumping out one thing after another. And the tool set evolved as we went through that evolution. What happened since? So since then, we've come along, we've moved to this, I like to call it the mass craft production era. Flexible production era, I've heard it thrown around. There's a couple of different terms for this, but it's basically, we've moved to a place where the organization has become this complex adaptive system with multiple teams on a shared journey trying to deliver as much value as possible. And this has come about because we've done all sorts of automation. Today, less than 2% of all Americans work in agriculture. Less than 10% work in manufacturing. Because of robots, automation, all sorts of clever stuff that's in the world. All these clever people thinking up new solutions. And in the last 25 years, we've had all sorts of trillion-dollar industries that never existed before. So I can't even look for metrics in the early 1900s or any of this stuff because it wasn't there. None of it existed. And it's amazing to think how quickly that rise of the trillion-dollar industries actually happened. So, fast increase in productivity, smaller workforce, due to these technological and computer advances. So if you look at the red line, that's our productivity as humanity from 47 onwards, and the employment rates from 47 onwards. You see there around 2000 where it suddenly plateaued. But the productivity, the employment plateaued around 2000, the productivity is still increasing. It's that automation or automation and automating the workforce is happening more and more and more and more. And this is changing how we actually deal with work in the workplace. So, what does this mean for an organization? So organizations are pretty much moving from this model, which would have been around in the mass production era, to a ratio that looks probably more like this. More of an equal thinker to worker ratio. One of the, we're paid from the neck up now. It's always one of the it was one of the best examples I ever saw of a workforce that wasn't engaged. I was doing a tour of a facility in Oxford, and I stopped and asked one of the manufacturing guys on the shop floor, asked him a question, and he said, "It's no point asking me, I'm paid from the neck down." And it was just like, one of the best examples I ever saw of, okay, they just have not got engagement. They're not working well as a team. Like this ship is not rowing in the same sort of direction. And we're moving from a place where people could have been paid from the neck down because they were manual workers and just had to follow a recipe. We're now coming to a place where we have to collaborate and think together and iterate and understand complexities and figure out a lighthouse or a shared goal and then collaborate together effectively to get to that shared goal. And the tool systems that you need in this space are different. And this is why, I'll explain a bit further in a couple of seconds, but this is why there's so much confusion when it comes to kind of, do we do Agile? How do we do Agile? What is Agile? What is Lean? It kind of, because people get so hung up in all this complexity that it confuses, muddies the water a little bit. So, it's exactly what I was just talking about, the rise of the knowledge worker. Sounds a bit like, one of those B horror films from way back. So Peter Drucker, very important statement from him. The most important and indeed the truly unique contribution of management in the 20th century was the 50-fold increase in the productivity of the manual worker in manufacturing. The most important contribution management needs to make in the 21st century is similarly to increase the productivity of knowledge work and the knowledge worker. So we're talking about agility and all these different things, but quite often we forget, why are we talking about agility? Why are we trying to do any of these things? So, which brings me to my actual, all of that was basically groundwork for me actually doing my talk. Seems a little bit over the top, but that's where we're at. So, the evolution of Lean. It's beautiful, isn't it? Clear as the mud. So, this right-hand side, cost of manufacturing. So in 1883, where that graph starts, cost of manufacturing was very high, and it basically came down over time. Across the bottom, we have the reduction of cycle time in the organization. So we're getting shorter and shorter and shorter cycle times as we introduce all these different lean tools and tool sets and techniques. Some interesting stuff, and if you go through all those different things, there's all sorts of things mentioned inside there, from Deming to Taylor to Ford's Model T, there's tons and tons and tons of stuff, right? You'll notice also that when I talk about lean, I tend to talk a little bit differently to most people in this sort of space about lean because I come from a manufacturing background. And because I spent so many years actually implementing these tools, a lot of the problems that they face when they get further down the kind of adoption route of Agile is very similar to the sort of discussions that I hear in this forum. That's why I really wanted to do this talk and chat about the difference between Agile and Lean. So it's got us to a point where we have all these Lean tools, and some of them are really cool sounding, like VSM and TQM, TPS, and Kaizen, and Hoshin Canary. You can see you're all riveted. And if I continued that timeline into the Agile space, if you Google timelines for Agile way of work, it goes back to like the 60s when all these different way of work and the different simplified methods and all these things came out. But you've also sort of arrived at a point very similar to that where we have this whole bunch of stuff, from Kanban and Scrum and Scrum Masters and business value and task lists, and am I a Scrum Master now, or am I a product manager, or am I a product owner? No, you're a product owner, I'm a product manager. Okay, so what do you do? No, so it gets, people get so hung up in titles and this complexity that we've built into the system. What did David say this morning? We've built a whole lot of gravity for ourselves. In trying to simplify things, we've created a lot of gravity that actually holds us back, and we get quite hung up on all of these terms. So, why does this matter? I suppose that was the real thing that I wanted to get through to everyone today, is just to understand that everything on that timeline was a solution to a problem that someone had in an organization. It's all there for a reason. So it's been mentioned a few times today that everything's changing constantly. Someone said earlier we'll very quickly, maybe Agile isn't going to be the term in the next couple of years, maybe it'll be something else. It constantly evolves. So you need to actually keep up with that evolution. And whether it's Lean or Agile or anything else, I think the more important thing is possibly we need to get back to why all this actually started. So I was fortunate enough to be taught problem solving by Ken Creeford. He was ex-GM of one of the largest Toyota plants in the States. And the one day we were at a conference and one of the guys thought they were going to put him on the spot. They said, well, how did Toyota come up with all these cool Lean tools? What did you do? And he said, well, we never had any of those tools. We had really good problem solving. We had really, really good structured problem solving in our organizations. And then we go and solve a problem properly. We'd root cause it. We find out the real organizational cause of what was the issue. And then we go and find the right tool in any other industry to actually correct that problem. And this is how they came out with all sorts of things like value stream mapping and visualization and Kanban and Scrum, and all these things are basically solved problems that people have solved in different industries. So what I want to kind of suggest is that these are the 5 Lean principles. And Dave, when he spoke this morning, said he was handed a document, a 400-page document, and the first one was talking about write less code. And I worry that whoever handed in that document probably knew very little about Lean, or they were an early adopter themselves. They didn't actually understand what Lean is about. Those are the 5 Lean principles: value, value stream, flow, pull, and perfection. That's it. It's no more complex than that. And value is always stated from the point of view of your customer, whether an internal customer or an external customer. And from my perspective, having coached Agile teams for the last 3 or so years, I struggle to see the difference between anything in Agile and that first statement of understanding who is your customer and getting rid of as much of that organizational gravity and rubbish between where you are and that customer or that user. To actually bring yourself as closely as possible to understand why you're doing things. I'm still seeing 1 or 2 notes, so I'm hoping I haven't put anyone to sleep yet. So, firstly, value, define value from the point of view of the customer. Your internal, external customers, I'm not going to get into that now. Secondly, we want to understand and map the value stream. So we want to understand how is value actually delivered through the value stream in your organization. This is why we implement Scrum boards for teams, or Kanban boards. We start visualizing the flow of work through a team. It's nothing more complex than that. It's purely just to start, because in IT or any of your organizations, most service-oriented organizations, all that stuff, that flow of value, is in people's heads and systems. You can't see it. So all we're trying to do is make it as visible as possible. I don't really care if you use a wall or a Scrum board or a whatever. It's just to pull it out of people's heads and see. So you can start understanding, is this the way that value flows, the stream of value through our organization. I just want to say over here to my timekeeper that my stopwatch didn't work the way I planned, so I've got no idea. Okay. Another 45 minutes will fly. So thirdly, we want to start creating flow. So we want to understand, because typically organizations are siloed, so we want to start creating some sort of flow through the organization. And any flow is better than no flow. Even push is better than, if you have to, just force stuff to actually start moving. And again, that's why we visualize things, so we can understand if there's bottlenecks. Any bottlenecks in your process, and please be careful, you don't refer to people when you're talking about bottlenecks. Don't like that. So we're talking about process. I'm trying to make it as light and efficient as possible. Fourth one, we want to establish pull. What do we mean by establish pull? Kanban is actually a tool used in the manufacturing industry for exactly that, for establishing pull. The idea being that you start breaking the silo down between two different process points, so that you can see if the next person in the process point is actually capable of handling the amount of work that you're passing on to them. And finally, we want to strive for perfection. And how do we strive for perfection? We continue to repeat the last four things. Value stream, flow, pull. Value stream, flow. Value stream, value stream, flow, pull. Over and over and over and over. If you go far enough back and you start studying some of the stuff, you'll come across Deming, Plan, Do, Check, Act. If you go and look at Six Sigma, we have the DMAIC, Define, Measure, Analyze, Improve, Control cycle. In most Prince 2 and PMBOK, we have that same Plan, Do, Check, Act cycle. If it's used correctly, it will do a lot of this stuff for you. The point I want to leave you with, and I'm pretty much done, I'm not going to talk much longer. I really want to emphasize this point, is that everything, all this noise that we hear in this organization, in this industry, when we talk about way of work, or agile, or lean, or any of these things, is that they're solutions that someone else has come up with to an organizational issue that they faced. Ari always likes to talk about cargo culting. Has everyone heard cargo culting before? A few times, I'm sure. We don't even realize, look it up, it's cool, Google it, it's really worth looking at. I'm not going to explain it to everyone, but it's basically a bunch of guys. I'm not going to explain it, it's a whole other discussion. Google cargo culting. There's solutions that people have come up with, solutions that people came up with for problems in their organization. And we're going around copying these solutions verbatim into our organizations, and we might not have the same problems that we're trying to fix. Be very, very careful what you copy. One of the worst examples I ever saw was when we were helping, I was still working in a company called Shannon Aerospace. And they said, yeah, we're going lean. And someone asked, well, what's lean? No, we went over to the other plant over there, they've got lots of whiteboards on them. Okay, we'll get whiteboards. And they actually went out and bought 63 6-meter-long whiteboards and stuck them up all over the factory. And a couple of weeks in, I went and asked one of the team leaders, what are you doing? No, I couldn't deliver any more project deliverables because I was filling in the whiteboard. Genuinely, it was actually taking over an hour a day of productive time from frontline leaders to fill in this board. It wasn't adding any business value to anything. And it was purely because they'd gone and gone, oh, okay, so lean is visual management. We need visual management. You all agile people going, no, agile people are even worse. Oh, you do Scrum. I'll do Scrum too. It's cool, we'll do Scrum. You do Kanban, I'll do Kanban too. Oh, you have a Scrum Master. We definitely need a Scrum Master too. Stop being a PM, start being a Scrum Master. Understand what problems you're trying to solve, And then go and look what other industries around you are doing, because there's a lot of, don't get me wrong, a lot of the Agile toolset is fantastic. If you're applying correctly for the right problem, that's probably the biggest message I want to get across today. So, in closing, is there a difference between Lean and Agile? From where I stand, I struggle to see it. Truly, don't get me wrong, I'm not talking about, because most people, if they talk Lean, they're talking about throwing that whole big toolbox that I showed you just now at an organization. And that's not Lean. Just the same way that Agile isn't throwing that whole big Agile toolbox at an organization. It's trying to find out who your customer is, what you're trying to achieve value-wise, and then putting the most efficient solution sustainably in place to get your teams in that direction. Thank you.
Thanks, Pierre. Are there any questions from the floor? I'm sure there's a couple of questions.
No, I don't think I need a microphone. It's fine. So we've been in an industry that has come from the old days of grey suits and grey shoes and hanging out with mustache and smoky rooms and all that. And I've seen a lot of issues with getting rid of what they believe used to be their project management practices. But now, instead of just finding something that works, we now need to find a new thing. Something to replace this thing with. It must be a thing, it must have a name. And it's very difficult to convince people that it doesn't need to have a name. As long as it does what you need from it, it's cool. You can give it a name afterwards if you want. Don't care what you call it. As long as it works, it works. So is there any kind of, I don't know, advice or way of getting people to understand that you don't have to have something that comes in a package with a price tag on it?
So we had Clint Berry was working for us for a while, and I think I thought it could be RMB. I'm not sure who we were going to go and see for the first time. And they did exactly that same talk that you just, same question. It was this kind of, and Clint went, look, I don't care if you call it orange marmalade, we're doing this thing. And it was this, you know. So some of the people, I'm working with a fantastic team at Momentum at the moment. I hope I can mention that. There's over 100 of them that are all going like Agile like crazy. And first it was we're going Agile, then it was we're going safe. And it's frustrating because sometimes you do just need a name for people to get on board. It drove, like Ari can vouch for me on this one, it's driven us crazy because we've been doing this stuff for years. And safe came along, and so we've got the safe certification, we can go safe, and suddenly everyone's like, yeah, we'll do that because there's a framework to climb into and a name. So I wish I could give you a silver bullet in this one. Sometimes name does help, and I know that sounds silly, but just before I left, the last thing I did in Europe before I came back to South Africa, I assisted with Lufthansa with a large project to standardize across all their European bases. And they called it, I can't remember the name of it now, but it was also one of these, they came out with the name, the marketing campaign before we actually did the thing. But it actually worked. I don't know how, but it got people behind it because we're doing this Aero 3000 or whatever it was called. I can't remember the name anymore. It shows how much the name meant to me. But some people just need that, unfortunately. Yeah.
Performance seems to be believable, you have to package.
Yeah, this is true.
We still got time for just one more question. Anyone? Take it.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Pierre.
Cool. Thanks.
We've had a swap of the talk.